Welcome, brave listeners, to Wilhelm Presents Frightening Tales. I'm your host, Wilhelm. Tune in each week where I entertain my listeners with another dark and creepy tale of the paranormal, donated by authors from all over the world. If you are an author of some paranormal fiction and would like to share a story with my listeners, submit one at frighteningtales.com. And while you're there, tune in for more than 100 episodes of previous content. Today's episode is written by Glenn Dungan, currently based in Brooklyn, New York. He exists within a Venn diagram of urban design, sociology, and good stories. When he's not obsessing about one of those three, he can be found at a park, drinking black coffee and listening to podcasts about murder. For more of his work, please visit his website, WhereisGlennnow.com. You can also find him on Substack, WhereisGlennnow? And also on Instagram at, you guessed it, at WhereisGlennnow. Here's his tale. Don't look at the angel on Cobbler Street. Miranda was gorgeous. She wore a tight black dress that hugged her hips and her chest. Hair the color of outer space fell in curls over her shoulders that were guarded with a punk rock style jean jacket. She did not wear heels and instead opted for flats. Perhaps this was a sign she was open to venturing into another bar, or simply taking a walk if things went well. Her eyes were orbital and her smile was radiant, and she ordered a gin martini, and I an old-fashioned. She smelled of mint and citrus. We discussed everything as if on flashcards, our jobs, aspirations, colleges, time spent in the city. Eventually, we got to stories from our youth. By now, the velvet curtains which surrounded us seemed to fluctuate, the whiskey elevating my consciousness. My hand crept towards Miranda's thigh, and she allowed it. She said, "I remember looking over an edge of the Grand Canyon. I had my hiking shoes on, and I was perfectly safe, but I thought, in that moment, that if someone were to push me, or if I were a little less careful, I could have fallen. What an idiot I was." "But you didn't," I said. She bit her bottom lip, looked at her hands. "Sometimes I have dreams that I do." "That's fair," I said. "Sometimes you don't realize how much danger you were in until you do. That's a part of growing up. Have you had any moments like that?" "Like what?" It was difficult to hear Miranda clearly over the hum of jazz, the clinking of glasses, the muted laughter. I was partially deaf in my right ear. I took another sip of my cocktail and realized too that the spirits had stretched my focus. I was nearing on tipsy. I'm glad I did that additional shot at the dive around the corner. I didn't want Miranda to think I could hold 3 drinks. I didn't want to reveal the lakes of anxiety in my brain, the reliance of poison to numb the torrent in my skull. And Miranda was so pretty. I recovered. "A moment when you are in danger but don't realize it?" "Yeah," she said, leaning forward. I could have kissed her right there. I opened my stupid mouth instead. "Well, I grew up in a small town. There was one main street. My graduating class was 50 students. There were acres in between houses. Most parents were mechanics who worked on one another's cars. shuffling around money amongst themselves or the pubs or the grocery stores. I remember several things. Italian ice and Joe's, sword fighting with sticks in the woods, my first and last cigarette behind the gas station. We were an incredibly homogeneous community with the exception of Cobbler Street. Like the opposite of the other side of the railroad tracks, Miranda said. Vespers of alcohol were beginning to possess me. I wondered if she could see that I was reading her lips. Sort of, I said. It was like that scene in The Wizard of Oz, when the Technicolor appears, although only for that street. The rest of us were still on the farm. Cobbler Street was a contained universe, and it was actually a cul-de-sac. It looked as if some divine presence had scooped out a 1950s suburban utopia and plopped it in the middle of a lower-class woods. The entire street seemed to glow, as if morning were brighter here. The grass was the strangest thing. On the Cobbler side, it had a summer sheen all year round, and just across the street was the clumped nettles and orange weeds of dying blades, as if the nutrition in the soil determined to cease at the perimeters. The houses were not mansions, but they were bigger than the trailers we lived in. The children who lived on Cobbler Street went to school with us. They dressed differently. They weren't assholes or some prep school track art critic or engineers. They kept to themselves. No one invited them out of Cobbler Street, and none of them invited us to Cobbler Street. They were polite and seemed vaguely out of touch with the current beats of pop culture. When The Empire Strikes Back was released, they seemed surprised that A New Hope was not in theaters anymore, as if they didn't understand how theaters worked. They were odd kids, but the least odd of them all was Jim Hemp. He was in my class and had thin hair and slightly sickly looking. But he seemed to understand social cues a little better than the other Cobbler kids. Sometimes I would catch him watching us at recess, as if he understood the value of friendship but could not decipher the rules. I had a massive crush on Esther, who was a couple years older. Although I didn't want to admit it, the Cobbler kids were so strange, and I was embarrassed to announce my attraction to one of them. I was nice to Jim Hemp. I didn't make fun of the way he and his family and everyone else on the street spoke, like they came from old radio programs, or that when he brought lunch, he seemed to only eat wartime provisions, dehydrated pizza and stew and all that. Another reason I liked Jim Hemp was that he could be my link into Cobbler Street. I couldn't understand why the Cobbler kids and their parents were in some gated community, nor could I understand why they didn't cross-pollinate in town. But I was curious, perhaps more curious than most, and so I sat with Jim Hemp instead of the other kids during lunch, ignored the globs of food he ate from the tins, listened to his strange transatlantic dialect. We had very little interest other than the fact that we were both boys. I showed him comic books and baseball cards and then had to explain both to him. Not once did he ever tell me about where he was from, or what his dad did, or even where he was going for Christmas. It took me 6 months to implant in his head the idea of inviting me over. When he finally invited me, I felt like an astronaut before heading into the shuttle. I was swimming. Miranda had come closer to me, put her hands on my knee. Her lips glimmered with dirty martini gloss. It doesn't sound like you were ever in any danger, she said. Unless Jim was a serial killer. Oh, or his family was. Like some Norman Bates business. Hold on, I said, swaying a little bit. I didn't get to what he said when he invited me over. What? He said that when I come over to not look at the angel. Excuse me? We agreed the following Tuesday. Instead of turning right and walking with the rest of my classmates, I turned left and followed Jim home. If Jim made any notion of offense to my being joshed at by following him, he did not show it. I didn't care that I had somehow managed to alienate my friends in exchange for my friendship with the strange and otherworldly Jim Hemp. I needed to know what Cobbler Street was like. To advance even a crumb of my knowledge would make this all worth it. Esther was in high school, so she did not walk with us. It dawned on me that Jim walked this path home alone every day. As the kids jumped and paraded through the woods to their homes, Jim walked silently in isolation. It hurt to hear the muffled laughter of the kids at the other end of the woods, an auditory reminder of a ship adrift at sea, exiled from the fleet. I wondered how many of those laughs were directed at us. I wondered how many times Jim had heard my own contributions to mocking him as the rest of us walked back to our meager homes. We arrived 20 minutes later at the edge of Cobbler Street. White picket fences enclosed perfectly cut green grass that was so healthy as to be sickly, especially in comparison to the crunched dead blades underneath our feet. The shivering elms behind our backs, even then I remembered there being something unnatural about the street. The air felt different here, more relaxed, warmer. I remembered thinking that I could get used to living on Cobbler Street. I understood why they didn't allow anyone in. Jim brought me around the cul-de-sac. Cobbler Street was small enough that I could see the rest of the world beyond the fences. Although there were no gates or guards, and technically anyone could step onto Cobbler Street, this place had the impression of a snow globe. We passed a neighbor, Mr. Smith. He waved at Jim and I with an almost cartoonish, "Howdy, boys." I asked Jim why everyone talked like an old-time radio here. He said he didn't know what I meant. People were out on their lawns, reading, having iced tea. Jim's mother, Mrs. Hemp, gave us some cookies, and we played solitaire on the porch, which I always thought was a game for old people and for one person. There were no Ataris in his house, no comic books, sans the one I gave him to win his favor, and even this was hidden akin to found pornography. No television. I enjoyed Jim Hemp well enough now that I was in his element. The small enclave of Cobbler Street was idyllic. I heard birds instead of revved engines. I smelled daisies instead of gasoline and cigarettes. A wayward sprinkler from the neighbor forced our game to a halt, and we transitioned into a surprising burst of adrenaline as we left the porch of the front lawn and ran to the side of the house. I remembered that feeling, the making of a new friendship, a burst of joy that I had not experienced before. There was something so terribly innocent about Jim Hemp. And 10 minutes later, Esther came down the street with her long dress and her cascading brown hair. There was nothing sexual about her, yet I was immensely fascinated. My own puberty amplifying her absolute plainness. Anyway, is this some Tale about a lost love? Is this the real horror story here? Miranda asked, her lips puckered, smelling faintly of olives and gin. She gave me a sideways glance. Do you want to get out of here? Maybe? I can hardly see you. Hold on, I said. I had not thought of Esther in many years. I'd not actually thought of Cobbler Street either. I've thought of Jim in the way that any of us kept tabs on old classmates, but whenever I thought of his features, my mind obscured with television static. I felt my soul beginning to look over the precipice of a cliff. My mind now twisting into a knot, old horrors had begun to swell inside me, revealing themselves in a way that made me feel vulnerable, paralyzed. I looked into Miranda's eyes, and within the lakes of them I could not pull away. The lakes being oceans, folding my consciousness inward. Nameless dread infected my thoughts, although I knew this was stupid, that I was on a date with a beautiful woman, that the whiskey had well turned my mind to goo. I opened my mouth, and Miranda took this as a sign to whisper something into my right ear. But I thought of the angel of Cobbler Street. Esther went into the house, and we walked in circles around the cul-de-sac, picking apples that Mr. Fresno let us pluck and reminding us to follow the rules with a wink. Mrs. Bartlett's poodle went by and we petted, and Jim said it was a prized poodle, but couldn't say why. Then Mrs. Bartlett, her eyes lighthouses in a storm, said, "We're all prized here. And remember, don't look at the angel, Jim. Tell your friend the same." I remember this look because it felt very cold. I did not like Mrs. Bartlett's unflinching gaze. Her pressed apron and white gloves, her polka-dot dress. I did not like how she and everyone else stood straight as if at church, which I've never gone to. The sky turned orange and cast long shadows along the house. Jim said that it was time to head inside. There was a franticness to his voice that was unlike his typical bass demeanor, tugging my wrist with unexpected strength. We reached his manicured front lawn. I could see his family in the house through the windows like station dolls. Esther was knitting by a fire, and Mr. Hemp was smoking tobacco, and Mrs. Hemp was preparing a ham for supper. A car suddenly appeared in the middle of the cul-de-sac, rumbling along the cobblestones. I had not heard the vehicle approach. The car was periwinkle and looked like it belonged in a milkshake shop where they served you out of your car. It had chrome plating, a flag was on the antenna with a pyramid on it. A shadowed figure was in the vehicle, and it looked like someone coming from work, but from an office. Our dads would come in smelling like motor oil and grease, our moms coming back with paper cuts and broken nails from tap dancing on cash register buttons. This looked to be a man from the city, broad-brimmed hat, broad shoulders. Jim whispered in my ear, "Don't look at the angel." He tried to pull me away again. "Why? Just don't," he said again, pulling me into the house. Through the fishbowl window of the Hemp's house, no one stirred. Mrs. Bartlett tended to their trees. Mr. Cosgrove watered his plants. It was as if this strange visitor evaded attention or repelled it. Jim pulled me away, tried to get me into the house. "Come on!" He tried to ply me, but I could not resist looking. I knew in the deepest recesses of my soul that this was the reason why Cobbler Street was so odd, an island unto itself. It was this man. Except it wasn't a man. It was a woman. The The shadow must have confused me, the setting sun messing with my perceptions. The periwinkle and chrome steed opened, and out stepped a woman in a white wedding dress that looked a little bit like one of the girls wore in my dad's special magazines. She wore a gray trench coat type jacket over her lacy dress. I spotted a crown of blonde hair. An angel indeed. I remembered thinking that it was odd to add indeed after the sentence. Who is she? The angel, said Jim. Don't look at her, she doesn't like it. Why not? That's the rules. Everyone kept to themselves. A woman wearing a checkered pink dress across the street came outside and gave her husband a beer to quell his thirst as he continued to mow the lawn. A boy, probably in Esther's class, read a book on the porch. Even a toddler continued to play with his toy figures on the lawn, terribly uncurious to what could have been a supermodel visiting Cobbler Street. I sensed the angel moving along the sidewalk, sensed her walking on lawns as if she owned the place, like some intrusive landlord. She rounded the corner of Mr. Osprey tending his garden, and Mr. Osprey did not look up or acknowledge her, nor did she acknowledge him. It was like some game she was playing, and they playing with her. Don't look at her, Jim said again, more sternly. But this made me want to look at her more. The angel was human appearing, but not quite so. Her face was adorned in some sort of localized sunlight, as if she had a flashlight on her visage. It was like staring into the sun. A flashlight on her face? Miranda asked, now ordering a martini along with her check. She had given me space, presumably to give me space to orchestrate my emotions with my hands, which were now becoming turbulent. I ordered another old-fashioned. No, a flashlight was her face, I said. Look, I know I sound crazy, but just wait. I need to tell you about the angel. You're right, she said, smiling. About the angel? No. That you sound crazy. She ate the olive and sipped from the glass with the very rim, which was previously attempting to be all over me. She leaned back in her seat, crossed her arms. I guess I'm crazy too for staying here so long. What? I heard enough of her, but what she was saying was really mean. I wanted to give her a chance to excuse herself. Never mind, she said. Keep going. So I did. I needed to. I needed someone to listen. Mrs. Hemp's voice shook me from my paralysis as she called for dinner. Maybe tomorrow I'll tell you, said Jim, and his face lightened up. At lunch, maybe. What is that? Shut up, Jim said. Don't even say anything. My parents won't let you come over ever again. This threat was enough for acquiescence, and I joined the Hemp family for dinner. Boiled ham and peas. I sat next to Jim and across from Esther. Mr. and Mrs. Hemp flanked the dinner table. Mr. Hemp eyed me, and then eyed Jim. I could not decipher the coda between his father and son, but I knew it was wrought with symbols. Mrs. Hemp asked me about my life. Esther kept her eyes at her plate, making remarks about how different Cobbler Street was, although this was not in a way that seemed she enjoyed being a denizen of this neighborhood. I kept glancing out of the window to catch a glimpse of the angel and her ignited features. A trenchcoat-clad silken dress haunted the lawns and inspected the cars and watched the wind rustle the trees, as if she were in a museum. It was as if the entire street were a diorama for her inspection. We ate our hams in silence as the neighbor's back door squeaked open and closed, the steady thumps of feet working their way around the house and through the back gate to round to the front of the Hemp's abode. Everyone ignored this, continuing to eat, to speak about their day in their funny radio-like voices. I must have reacted to the approaching footsteps outside the front door because Mr. Hemp put down his glass of water with an unexpected slam and looked at me with sudden alertness that shook me. I felt like I was being scolded at by another boy's father, which I suppose I was. He said, "Don't look at the angel, boy. Don't look at her." I remember how he said it. Boy. The punctuation of it made me feel small, unwelcome. I kept my eyes down and felt a deluge of tears. The ham upon my plate looked fake, like some cartoon version of a ham. Like someone's idea of a ham. The knob turned and the door opened. The angel had stepped into the house. In my house, when people opened the door, we typically stood to greet them. Yet the angel entered with no applause, no fanfare. The Hemp family continued to eat as the angel worked her way into the living room, picking up Mr. Hemp's pipe and Esther's half-completed scarf, as if they were alien artifacts. She held the pictures on the fireplace rim at odd angles. It looked like someone was waving a flashlight around the bend of the room. Jim began to cry. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring him." "You shouldn't have, but you did." "I just wanted a friend," Jim said, sniffling. "Something that was mine." "Don't look, boy," said Mr. Hemp. The angel walked into the dining room. Alternating molecules of sulfur and clean laundry invaded my nostrils. The angel circled the table like a wading shark. It picked up plates and cutlery. It played with the napkins before setting them down. The Hemp family kept their heads down, chewing solemnly, ignoring the angel. Although the room had become very bright, I began to wince. "Why are you sniffling, Jim?" asked Mrs. Hemp, her voice chipper and perky. "Allergies, Jim?" asked Mr. Hemp, spearing a cube of meat like a miniature harpoon. "Allergies, right, Jim? That's why you're sniffling." "Yes, Father," he said. "Allergies." The angel glided to Mrs. Hemp, where it passed with little entertainment for situating behind Esther. An electric buzz preceded her approach. "Do you like the food, Tom?" asked Mrs. Hemp, smiling her eyes red. Tears trailed down her cheeks, slime trails of mascara. "Yes," I said, chewing. "I do very much, Mrs. Hemp." I could not understand why, but I was beginning to cry. I wanted to go home. I was always a good runner. I felt that perhaps I could book it. "Do you want more iced tea, Esther?" Mrs. Hemp said to fill the sucking sound which had begun to emit from the angel. "Yes, please, Mother," said Esther, receiving the iced tea. "Care for some mashed potatoes, Tom?" Esther had finally acknowledged me, and my heart stirred. The angel was standing behind her now, looking down at us with her oppressive flashlight gaze. Prepubescent puberty had taken me. Base unconscious desires strayed my attention. I stared at the angel, and the angel stared back. I had crossed the threshold of no return to sobriety. Miranda was gone to the bathroom or something. I kept watching people watch me, and I began to tell anyone who would look at my way the continuation of the story. So wrapped was I in the spell of my own tale that it appeared nonsense to cease. The bartender said I could not order another drink and forced the check into my hands as memories flooded back into me. The angel of Cobbler Street was not beautiful. She was not a model, with a silken dress and a long coat and golden hair. Only in the corners of my vision did she take that form, to make her molestations of Cobbler Street digestible. The force before me was a writhing mass of down, swan, feathers, and tentacles that looked like ribbons that were as thin and translucent as curtains. It had many eyes and no mouth, and for reasons I could not comprehend, each eye pointed towards a different constellation in the cosmos. I saw within its 1,000 eyes horizons of distant planets, tall towers that bent at impossible angles, exploding suns, tidal waves larger than the continents. I saw turtles and jellyfish, and they spoke in strange languages, and they wept ad infinitum. None of the hemps intervened. They sat there at the table weeping but paralyzed. 2 tendrils appeared from its feathered asteroid body and formed arms, with many joints and many fingers. The fingers scaled the entire length of its newly protruded limbs as if sea anemones erupted from its immaculate flesh. Its writhing, unfurling arms had the smoothness of porcelain, a strange, anemic quality like invasive latex gloves. It touched my face, lifted it up as delicately as a parent perks up a crying child by the chin. A pulse emitted from its core, and I was swept with the feeling of isolation. I felt like I was in an abandoned parking lot. The angel held my chin in place, but I could see the hemp family at the table. They had turned into something lifeless, like taxidermy, staged like the idea of what routine supper was. The shining pulse which occupied the hemp homestead now refracted off the hemp's family flesh. Their skin was plastic like dolls, like department store mannequins.
Why did you look at me?
A church choir, both masculine and feminine, entered my thoughts.
Why did you look at me?
I don't know, I said.
Was this forbidden? Do not look at me. You looked at me.
I'm sorry. The angel stroked my chin, a million fingernails.
You are to leave. You are to forget.
Okay. Yes. The angel trailed its left appendage to my ear and massaged my earlobe before cupping it with its smooth hands. The fingers upon its arms flexed and twitched, snapping like an applause for live poetry.
My words are final and damning. If you are just a child, not unlike the ones I keep here, I will protect part of you from my voice. You will forget my face.
The angel's voice felt like a thunderbolt into my ear canal, but only on my right side. I could not hear, and the white was hot and blinding, and I could only feel the plastic hands of the angel cup the side of my face. Its millions of fingers crackling, its millions of knuckles, its millions of eyes seeing worlds beyond my comprehension. I woke up across town, in the middle of the woods. I remembered thinking that I had taken a nap after school and somehow let it get away from me, or that I had a bout of uncharacteristic sleepwalking, or, given my difficulty hearing, perhaps I had fallen from a tree and knocked myself out cold. I went home after that, feeling dazed and unbalanced. I could not hear much and needed a hearing aid that set my family back a bit. It turned out to be my affliction was not due to blunt trauma, but something psychological. My family could not afford a doctor of that caliber. And then I grew up. "Did you see the family after that?" asked the man who found me on the street, hunched over with my shoes in my own vomit. "Or the angel again?" or Cobbler Street. I don't remember when I left the bar, only that I was catapulted out by the bouncers to the applause of the patrons. But I was here, and Miranda was gone. What a different night I could have had. This nice man found me and given me a bottle of water. For reasons that were his and his alone, he decided to sit with me and keep me upright. But I still needed to ask why he felt the need to ensure my safety. I was at the bar, he said, and what you were saying seemed very interesting. So, do you remember what happened after? I shook my head. No, I went back to school and I grew up. You ever see Jim again, or the rest of the Hemp family? In school, I said. But those kids were so weird. They kept to themselves. They spoke funny, and their neighborhood was a gated community that looked so different than ours. And the angel, what did it say to you at the end? I don't know. But I feel like it said something in my right ear. Maybe that's why I can't hear. This was not the answer the man was looking for. Even in my slurring disorganization, I could feel the aura of disappointment emanating from him. Do you wish you entered Cobbler Street? The man asked, brows raised. I do, I said, remembering now that there was something I was forgetting. But I could not place what. I felt like I had just awoken and a fleeting dream was at the edge of my grasp, half formed, losing shape by the millisecond. One of the greatest mysteries of my life. Just wanted to spend one day there. Never got the chance. The man chewed on the insides of his cheek. He looked down at his feet and slowly but subtly stepped away from the growing puddle, the vomit which soiled me. Well, for what it's worth, I bet the boy you were with that day appreciated you coming by. Probably showed him that there was more out there than, Cobbler Street, I reminded, the letters appearing like alphabet cereal in milk. Right, said the man, nodding. And the boy's name was Jim, I said, feeling the name anchor me, holding me steady. Right, said the man, a hint of a smile. Then he helped pick me up. Steadying me against the wall, he flatted my coat and helped me zip up my jacket when I fumbled with it. Then he wished me good luck, and he went on his way. After 10 minutes of swaying like an idiot, I walked home.
Thank you, brave listeners, for joining me on another dark story. I urge all my listeners to go out and find more content by our weekly author, if you're not too timid. If you enjoyed today's story and you've tuned in on YouTube, please click the like button. And if you don't want to miss further stories, click the subscribe button. And if you were present today on Spotify and enjoyed the story, you're only more than welcome to leave a comment. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave the show a rating as you see fit. All these little things help the show. And wherever you listen, please do me a favor and share today's story, if you can. Then tune in next week for another frightening tale, if you're brave enough.